I spent 20 years as her housekeeper raising her child. Then she accused me of theft, but her daughter exposed her darkest secret. Golden autumn sunlight streamed through the large windows of Prescott Manor, casting warm patterns across the imported marble countertops. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, a scent I'd come to associate with the start of my day for the past 20 years. I'm Helena Barrett, 55 years old, and I've dedicated 2 decades of my life as the loyal housekeeper to the Prescott family. My hands worked with practiced precision as I prepared breakfast, exactly how each family member preferred crispy toast with soft-boiled eggs for Mr. Edward Prescott, freshly squeezed orange juice for Mrs. Cassandra Prescott, and a mug of hot chocolate with exactly 3 cookies for young Lily. Every morning, same routine, same movements. Reliability was my hallmark in this household. Helena. The cheerful voice broke through my thoughts as Lily burst into the kitchen, her school uniform slightly rumpled and her hair not quite perfectly braided. At 12, she was a whirlwind of energy and warmth, in a house that often felt too perfectly arranged, too cold. She threw her arms around my waist, hugging me tightly. "Can you finish the story from last night? The one about the girl who outsmarted the evil sorceress?" I smiled, patting her head gently. "Perhaps tonight, dear, your mother wouldn't approve of fairy tales at breakfast." But Lily's eyes sparkled with that familiar mischief. "Mom never has to know, she's too busy with her jewelry and social calls anyway." There was warmth in my chest at our small conspiracy, but also an undercurrent of unease that had been growing for weeks. The atmosphere in the mansion had shifted lately, conversations between Mr. and Mrs. Prescott abruptly ending when I entered rooms, hushed phone calls behind closed doors, and Cassandra's increasingly scrutinizing glances. As if summoned by my thoughts, Cassandra Prescott glided into the kitchen. Her blonde hair was immaculately styled, not a strand out of place despite the early hour. The overpowering scent of her French perfume immediately dominated the coffee aroma. Her eyes, sharp, calculating, swept over me and Lily with a coldness that never failed to make my spine stiffen. Her gaze lingered on Lily's arm around my waist, and her lips curled into something that resembled a smile but lacked any warmth. "Lily, darling," she said, her voice honey-coated ice. "A Prescott doesn't take breakfast in the kitchen with the help. We've discussed this, haven't we? The dining room is set and waiting." I felt Lily's small body tense against mine, but I maintained the pleasant professional expression I'd perfected over the years. "I was just about to bring everything to the dining room, Mrs. Prescott. The fresh pastries needed a few more minutes." Cassandra's eyes narrowed fractionally. "See that you do, Helena." She turned to Lily. "Run along now, your father is already seated." After breakfast, I was clearing the dishes when Cassandra's voice came over the house intercom. "Helena, please come to my bedroom." The request was unusual. Cassandra rarely summoned me to her personal chambers during morning hours. When I arrived, she was standing by her vanity, one manicured hand resting on the polished wood. "Helena," she began, her voice unnaturally controlled, "I've noticed several pieces in my jewelry collection aren't quite where they should be." I blinked in surprise. Cassandra had never concerned herself with such details before she'd entrusted the organizing and cleaning of her extensive collection to me for years. "Which pieces, ma'am? I can check the inventory log I keep." "That won't be necessary. I'd like you to inspect the safe and cases now while I watch." The request sent a small flicker of alarm through me, but I nodded obediently. Of course. Her bedroom was the epitome of calculated luxury cream silk wallpaper, custom furniture imported from Italy, crystal fixtures catching the morning light. Like Cassandra herself, it was beautiful, but cold, perfect, but unwelcoming. As I opened her jewelry safe, a hidden compartment in her walk-in closet that only she and I knew about, I noticed something immediately wrong. The electronic keypad showed smudges that weren't consistent with my careful handling, and there was a thin layer of disturbed dust around the edges. Inside, subtle differences jumped out at me, boxes placed at slightly different angles, necklaces arranged in an order I would never have chosen. Someone had definitely been here, and it wasn't me. I started to turn to point this out when I felt Cassandra's presence directly behind me, watching my every move with hawk-like intensity. Is something wrong, Helena? Her voice carried a strange undercurrent. No, ma'am, I replied carefully. Everything appears to be here. She leaned closer, her perfume nearly suffocating in the enclosed space. They say, don't they, that even the most loyal person can be tempted by sparkling diamonds. The implication hung in the air between us. 20 years of service and she was testing me like this. I met her gaze steadily. Ma'am, trust is something I value far more than any precious stone. Her eyes darkened, but she simply waved her hand dismissively. You may go. As I descended the grand staircase, movement caught my eye from the hallway leading to Edward's study, where the family's main safe was kept. Julian Prescott, the Prescotts' 22-year-old son, was slipping out looking disheveled. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot as if he'd had a long, chaotic night. When our eyes met, he smirked hastily, shoving something into his jacket pocket before sauntering past me without a word. Back in the kitchen, something small and white near Cassandra's door caught my attention. I bent down to discover a monogrammed handkerchief with the initials JP. My stomach tightened as I tucked it into my pocket. When had Julian been in Cassandra's room, and why would mother and son be keeping secrets from the rest of the household? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in Prescott Manor, and somehow I was about to be caught in the middle of it. Less than 3 hours after my unsettling encounter in Cassandra's bedroom, the house intercom buzzed again. Helena, please come to the living room immediately. Her voice was different, crisp, with an undercurrent of what almost sounded like satisfaction. When I entered the formal living room, my steps faltered. The scene before me was clearly staged. Edward sat rigid in his leather armchair, his face a cold mask of authority. Julian lounged on the sofa, one leg carelessly thrown over the other, scrolling through his phone with performative disinterest. Cassandra stood by the fireplace, her posture perfect as always, but there was something new in her expression. Anticipation. The tension in the room was palpable, like the moment before lightning strikes. Helena. Cassandra's voice cut through the silence. My Patek Philippe. Watch has gone missing since yesterday. Would you care to explain? I felt a chill run down my spine, but kept my composure. Missing, ma'am. I haven't seen your watch. As you know, I only clean your jewelry when specifically instructed. Really? Her eyebrow arched with theatrical precision. Julian, please bring Helena's bag. Before I could process what was happening, Julian had already slipped out and returned with my handbag, the one I'd left in the kitchen while preparing lunch. I hadn't even noticed him take it. He handed it to his mother with a smirk that made my stomach turn. I don't understand, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Why would you need my... Open it. Edward commanded, speaking for the first time. Cassandra upended my bag onto the polished mahogany coffee table. My few personal items clattered out: wallet, reading glasses, house keys, a paperback novel, and then glittering obscenely among my modest possessions, a Patek Philippe watch, and several pieces of jewelry I had never seen before. The blood drained from my face. That's not... I didn't... Words failed me as the implications crashed down. Edward's face darkened with what appeared to be profound disappointment. Helena, why after all these years? Why would you do this to us? Mr. Prescott, I swear to you, I would never... I reached for the watch, but Cassandra swiftly gathered the jewelry, cradling it like injured birds. Don't touch them, she hissed. You've done enough damage. These aren't mine. Someone put them there. My voice rose with desperation. I've served this family loyally for 20 years. The double doors to the living room swung open and two police officers stepped in, their expressions grim and professional. It was as if they'd been waiting just outside, right on cue. "Right on time, officers," Cassandra said with a thin smile. "I'm simply doing my duty protecting my family's valuables," she added, glancing at Edward as if seeking approval. The older officer stepped forward. "Helena Barrett." I nodded, unable to find my voice. "We've received a report of theft of high-value items. I need to place you under arrest. This is a mistake." I insisted, my voice shaking now. "I've never stolen anything in my life. Someone planted those things in my bag." The officers exchanged a look I'd seen countless times on crime shows, the silent acknowledgement that the guilty always claim innocence. As the officer recited my rights, the door burst open again. Lily stood there, her small face streaked with tears, her school uniform rumpled. "Helena didn't steal anything," she cried, her voice piercing the formal atmosphere. "She wouldn't ever do that." Cassandra immediately moved to Lily, gripping her arm with barely disguised force. "Quiet, Lily," she whispered through clenched teeth. "This is adult business." I caught Lily's eyes and tried to convey reassurance despite the handcuffs being fastened around my wrists. I couldn't bear to see her witness this, to have her last image of me be one of disgrace. "It's all right, Lily," I said softly. "Everything will be fine." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. As the officers led me toward the front door, I caught one final glimpse of the Prescotts. Edward stood with his back to me, staring out the window. Cassandra's hand rested possessively on Lily's shoulder. And Julian. Julian stood on the bottom step of the grand staircase, casually flipping open a leather wallet thick with crisp new bills, his eyes meeting mine with cold indifference. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just Cassandra's jealousy or cruelty. This was calculated, planned. Julian was part of it, perhaps even instrumental. The handkerchief, his early morning appearance, the too convenient timing of everything. They had set me up with terrifying precision. As the police car door closed behind me, I heard Julian's voice carry across the driveway. "We're still doing the rest tonight, right, Mom?" Through the window, I saw Cassandra's slight nod, a chilling smile flitting across her face like the edge of a knife. As the car pulled away from the home where I'd spent more than a third of my life, one terrible question kept circling in my mind. What was the rest they were planning? And why couldn't I shake the feeling that Lily's sweet, trusting Lily was their next target? The heavy iron gate slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. In that single moment, everything I had been, my identity, my reputation, my life's work seemed to vanish into thin air. Freedom was a luxury I no longer possessed. "Prisoner 24601, step forward." The corrections officer's voice was flat, devoid of any recognition that I was a human being with a name and a history. Helena Barrett was gone, now replaced by a number and an orange jumpsuit that felt coarser against my skin than any fabric I'd touched in decades. As they stripped away my housekeeper's uniform, the clothes I'd worn with quiet dignity for 20 years, I felt more naked than when they actually made me change. The weight of the rough orange fabric settled on my shoulders, heavier than any sentence that hadn't yet been pronounced. When I was escorted to the women's cell block, the reaction was immediate. Pairs of eyes tracked my movement like predators sizing up new prey. "Well, look who's here." The jewelry queen herself. A tall woman with tattoos snaking up her neck called out, prompting laughter from several others. I kept my gaze down, clutching the thin mattress and toiletries I'd been issued. Show no weakness, I reminded myself. But showing strength wasn't an option either. A stocky woman with flaming red hair, which I would later learn earned her the nickname Ruby, approached, circling me with deliberate steps. "So the diamond thief has to eat prison food like the rest of us now, huh?" Her eyes raked over me with calculating intensity. Bet those fancy Prescotts never thought their precious housekeeper would end up here. I remained silent. 20 years managing a household had taught me when words would only make things worse. The first days were a crash course in survival. Mealtimes were battles for seating with younger inmates deliberately bumping into me, spilling food on my uniform. I learned quickly which tables were off limits, which corners to avoid, and whose eyes never to meet. Clean the toilets, Grandma Ruby ordered on my second day, tossing me a filthy rag. Consider it your welcome party. I did as instructed, swallowing my pride. In here, hierarchy was everything, and I was at the bottom. That first night in the crowded cell, I lay rigid on my thin mattress, listening to whispers and occasional laughter directed my way. "Sleep tight, housekeeper," came a taunting voice from the darkness. "We've got plenty more fun planned for tomorrow." After 3 days, I was called to meet with my court-appointed attorney. Walter Briggs looked as if he hadn't slept in days, his rumpled suit a stark contrast to the crisp attire I was accustomed to seeing on Edward's legal team. He shuffled papers without making eye contact. "Mrs. Barrett, the situation isn't good." He began, his voice carrying the weight of defeat before we'd even started. "The evidence against you is substantial. The Patek Philippe watch alone is valued at over $50,000, not counting the other jewelry." He pushed a newspaper clipping across the table. "Mrs. Prescott has been giving interviews. The media has already convicted you." The picture showed Cassandra dabbing tears from the corner of her eye, perfectly poised even in apparent distress. "She's portraying herself as the heartbroken employer betrayed by the help she trusted implicitly." Briggs continued, "It's very compelling to the public. But it's a lie." I insisted. "Every word of it is a lie." Briggs sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "Look, I can get you a plea deal. Admit to the theft, express remorse, and we could be looking at 10 years, potentially parole after 3. He paused. "That's much better than life, which is what you're facing with the current charges." I clenched my fists beneath the table. "I won't confess to something I didn't do, Mr. Briggs." His expression told me he'd expected that answer but hoped for a different one. The next day, an inmate tossed a crumpled newspaper onto my bed during recreation time. "Your fancy lady's giving quite the performance," she said with a smirk. The headline made my stomach turn. "Helena Barrett Betrayal After 20 Years of Trust." Below, it was a photo of Cassandra looking fragile and wounded. Julian standing supportively at her side. The caption described him as the resilient son helping his family through this difficult time. Edward was barely visible in the background, his face turned away from the cameras. I felt sick reading the article's melodramatic account of how Cassandra had discovered the painful truth about someone she'd considered family. The brazen lies were presented as undisputed fact, my side of the story completely absent. A week into my incarceration, something unexpected happened. While returning from the showers, I found a small folded note on my pillow. I glanced around before opening it. "Not everyone believes the pretty stories they tell on TV." It read in messy handwriting. Later that night, Ruby passed by my bunk close enough to whisper, "Some rich folks will do anything to hide what they're really up to." I didn't respond, unsure if this was a trap or a genuine overture. In prison, paranoia was just another survival skill. At lights out, alone in the darkness, my thoughts inevitably turned to Lily. Her tear-streaked face when the police took me away haunted me. I wasn't afraid of prison, I was terrified for her. If Cassandra and Julian would go to such lengths to frame me, what else were they capable of? What was the rest of their plan I dreamed of? Prescott Manor, of reading fairy tales to Lily by the fireplace, her small hand clutching mine at the scary parts. "The good people always win in the end, right, Helena?" she would ask. I always assured her they did. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, as we lined up for breakfast, Ruby brushed past me, whispering words that sent ice through my veins. "Heard the little girl likes to eavesdrop on phone calls. You sure she hasn't gotten herself mixed up in all this?" Ruby's words haunted me throughout the day. The thought of Lily in danger twisted my stomach into knots tighter than any fear I had for myself. While I was trapped behind bars, life at Prescott Manor continued without me. But what kind of life had it become for Lily? I later learned that while I was adapting to prison life, Lily was fighting her own silent battle. In the days following my arrest, Lily spent hours alone in her bedroom staring at the empty chair where I used to sit each night to tell her stories. The fairy tales we shared about brave children outsmarting wicked adults had become eerily prophetic. Cassandra's behavior toward Lily shifted dramatically. Where before she had been coldly distant now, she smothered the girl with excessive sweetness, her eyes constantly monitoring Lily's every move like a hawk watching its prey. This sudden change wasn't motherly concern, it was surveillance. Edward, meanwhile, retreated further into himself. He cited work emergencies to avoid family dinners, spending late hours at the office. But Lily, sharp beyond her years, recognized his absence for what it truly was. Not busyness, but avoidance. He couldn't face what had happened under his roof. Julian became an even more sinister presence. Despite Edward supposedly cutting off his funds after several gambling incidents, he returned home each night with shopping bags from luxury stores, new watches glinting on his wrist. One evening, Lily was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when she overheard Julian speaking on the phone in the study. "Don't worry, Mom," he said in a hushed tone. "Everything's been handled cleanly. The kid doesn't suspect a thing." Lily froze, pressing herself against the wall. The kid. Was he talking about her? Seeds of suspicion that had been planted the day of my arrest began to germinate in Lily's mind. She knew I would never steal from the family. There had to be evidence somewhere proving my innocence. Her opportunity came when Julian left hastily for a party, forgetting to lock his bedroom door. With courage that made my heart ache when I learned of it, 12-year-old Lily slipped into his room and began searching under a false bottom in his desk drawer. She discovered a leather-bound notebook. Inside were pages of scribbled notes, details of asset liquidation, offshore accounts, and what was unmistakably a step-by-step plan. One entry made her blood run cold. Phase 1 frame, Helena. Phase 2, control, Lily. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost didn't hear the footsteps. When she looked up, Cassandra was standing in the doorway, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Darling," Cassandra purred, "there are some things you're too young to understand." With graceful movements belying the tension in the air, Cassandra crossed the room and gently took the notebook from Lily's hands. "I'm only doing what's necessary to protect our family," she said, stroking Lily's hair with calculated tenderness. "Sometimes adults make difficult choices for the greater good." After that incident, the pretense of normalcy dropped entirely. Lily was forbidden from leaving her room without permission. The main door's security code was changed. The staff was told she was going through a difficult adjustment period following my betrayal. Each night, Cassandra would sit on the edge of Lily's bed weaving elaborate stories about how I had deceived them all, how I had exploited their trust while secretly resenting their wealth and privilege. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, trying to turn Lily against the one person who might still protect her. But Lily was resilient. She pretended to accept her mother's version of events while silently searching for ways to uncover the truth. Her breakthrough came accidentally. Julian, always careless, left his old phone behind when upgrading to the latest model. While Cassandra was at her weekly spa appointment, Lily retrieved the phone from Julian's trash bin. Most of the data had been wiped, but Julian hadn't been thorough enough. In the archived messages, Lily found a text that made her hands tremble. "Job done. Money transferred to account. Don't let the little girl find out." The timestamp matched the day before my arrest. Lily now understood with terrible clarity that her family, or at least her mother and brother, were involved in something dark and dangerous, and I had been sacrificed to protect their secret. With determination beyond her years, Lily formulated a plan. She would use Julian's old phone to gather evidence. She stayed up all night considering where to plant it to capture incriminating conversations. Finally, she decided on the artificial flower arrangement in Cassandra's bedroom. It provided a perfect view of the vanity table and jewelry cabinet where her mother often took private calls. The risk was enormous. If caught, Lily knew she would face consequences far worse than being grounded. But she also understood that I was suffering for crimes I didn't commit, and no one else would help. 2 days after planting the phone, Lily overheard a fragment of conversation that chilled her to the bone. Cassandra was speaking on her private line, voice low and threatening. "Don't worry, the girl will cooperate. If not, we have other ways to ensure her silence." In that moment, Lily realized she wasn't just trying to clear my name, she was fighting for her own safety. Whatever her mother and Julian were involved in, they now saw her as a liability to be managed. Yeef. That evening, while checking the hidden phone to ensure it was still recording, Lily reviewed some of the captured footage. What she saw made her gasp. A tall man in an expensive suit had entered Cassandra's room when Lily was at school. As he gestured while speaking, the light caught a distinctive ring on his finger, an ornate signet ring with the name Davenport clearly engraved. Lily sat frozen, her young mind racing. Who was Davenport? And why did it feel like he, not her mother, might be the true puppet master behind everything that had happened? While I languished in prison, Lily was transforming from a carefree child into a determined investigator. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Her safety, my freedom, and possibly even her father's life all hung in the balance. Lily spent an entire night analyzing every corner of Cassandra's bedroom, planning where to place Julian's old phone to capture the most damaging evidence. She drew a crude map of the room, marking spots where her mother typically stood during calls, where she handled documents, and where she kept her jewelry. After careful consideration, she decided on the artificial flower arrangement sitting directly across from Cassandra's vanity, the perfect vantage point to capture both her mother's activities at her desk and the jewelry cabinet where those supposedly stolen pieces were likely hidden. Executing her plan required precision timing. Lily knew Cassandra spent exactly 45 minutes downstairs every morning having breakfast and reading financial news. The maid would have already cleaned the bedroom, and the security staff didn't patrol the family's private quarters during daylight hours. Her window of opportunity was narrow, 3 minutes at most. The next morning, heart hammering against her ribs, Lily slipped into her mother's bedroom with Julian's phone. She positioned it carefully among the silk flowers, angling the camera lens through a gap in the petals. Just as she finished, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Cassandra was returning early. Panic surged through Lily as the footsteps grew louder. She dove behind the heavy velvet curtains beside the window, pressing herself against the wall, barely daring to breathe. Cassandra swept into the room, muttering to herself as she retrieved her forgotten handbag. She paused directly in front of the flower arrangement, so close that Lily could smell her perfume from behind the curtain. "Everything must be perfect," Cassandra murmured. "Davenport doesn't tolerate mistakes." The name sent a chill through Lily Davenport, the same name engraved on the ring she'd glimpsed in the previous footage. Now she had confirmation this mysterious figure was central to whatever scheme had resulted in my imprisonment. After Cassandra left, Lily remained frozen behind the curtain for several minutes, her heart pounding so loudly she feared someone might hear it from the hallway. That night, she crept to the door of her mother's room, peering through the keyhole. The Cassandra who entered was almost unrecognizable from the polished socialite who appeared in charity galas and magazine spreads. This woman moved with predatory purpose, her face set in hard lines of calculation, rather than her usual manufactured warmth. Through the phone's recording, Lily watched her mother open the secret compartment in her jewelry cabinet, the same one I had checked on my final morning in the house. From it, Cassandra removed several pieces I immediately would have recognized as the ones I'd been accused of stealing. Cassandra made a call, her voice low, but clear enough for the phone to capture. The shipment will transfer to your possession tonight. The casino debts have been handled cleanly. Helena is nothing but history now. Lily remained at her post, monitoring through the night. Shortly after midnight, something unexpected happened. Instead of another phone call, a tall man in an impeccable black suit entered Cassandra's bedroom without knocking, the same man from the previous recording. He handed Cassandra a thick envelope. "Your cut," he said, his voice cultured but cold. "But remember, the Lily girl cannot become a problem." Cassandra's response sent ice through Lily's veins. "She's just a child, if necessary. I can arrange for her to be sent to boarding school, permanently." The threat was unmistakable even to 12-year-old ears. The conversation continued, revealing horrors beyond what Lily had imagined. "What if Edward starts asking questions?" Cassandra asked, a hint of genuine concern in her voice. Davenport's smile was chilling. "A car accident is our contingency plan, as agreed." Lily had to clamp her hand over her mouth to stifle her gasp. Not only was I framed, not only was she in danger, but her father, despite his flaws, was marked for death if he became suspicious. After Cassandra and Davenport left the room, Lily waited 20 agonizing minutes before retrieving the phone. With trembling hands, she transferred the video to her personal laptop and made multiple backups. She was smart enough to know that keeping such dangerous evidence only in the house was too risky. As she explored Cassandra's desk the next day, while her mother was at her weekly salon appointment, Lily discovered something that made her blood run cold: a draft of a suicide note bearing my name. The carefully crafted letter detailed how I, Helena Barrett, overwhelmed with guilt over betraying the family's trust, had decided to end my life in prison. Cassandra's plan became crystal clear: silence me permanently, blame it on remorse, and neatly close the case before fleeing with whatever ill-gotten gain she and Davenport had accumulated that evening. As Lily was backing up the latest video evidence to a USB drive, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "We know what you have. Sleep carefully tonight." Lily stared at the message, her hand frozen over her keyboard. Someone knew. They had discovered her investigation, her evidence, and now they were coming for her. In that moment, despite her young age, Lily made the decision that would ultimately save both our lives. She had to escape the mansion tonight, evidence in hand, no matter the risk. Back in my prison cell, I was drowning in a sea of hopelessness. The guard had just delivered the news. My sentencing hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning. The weight of this finality pressed against my chest, making each breath a labor. Walter Briggs visited that afternoon, his face even more haggard than before. He slumped into the chair across from me in the visitation room. "Helena," he began, his voice tinged with pity. "This is your last chance to consider the plea deal. The evidence against you is overwhelming." I stared at my hands folded tightly on the metal table. "You don't have any other options," he continued. "The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum sentence. I won't confess to stealing what I didn't take." I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. Briggs sighed, gathering his papers. "I'll do my best tomorrow, but prepare yourself." That evening in the dining hall, Ruby slid onto the bench beside me, her movements casual but her eyes alert. "Word is the Prescott kid has done something stupid," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "Davenport's people are buzzing." I nearly dropped my spoon. "Davenport, how do you know that name?" Ruby gave me a sideways glance. "Let's just say I ran with a different crowd before this place. Davenport isn't someone you mess with. If that girl of yours has gotten on his radar—" She didn't finish the sentence. Cold fear gripped my heart. What had Lily done? What I didn't know then was that Cassandra had begun to sense something was amiss. Though she maintained her composure, she had started checking Lily's room regularly, searching through her belongings when Lily was at school. She even installed monitoring software on Lily's devices, though thankfully not on the laptop Lily had kept hidden in her closet behind a loose panel I had once shown her. Lily, sensing the net closing in, hid the USB drive containing the damning evidence in a hollowed-out fairy tale book, a secret hiding spot I had taught her years ago for her small treasures. If you ever have something precious, I had told her, the best place to hide it is somewhere nobody would think to look twice. Now that childish hiding place held evidence that could save my life, and possibly her own. Lily knew she couldn't trust anyone in the mansion. The staff answered to Cassandra. Julian was complicit, and her father was either oblivious or deliberately avoiding the truth. She had to get out. She planned her escape meticulously. She would wait until 2 a.m. when the night security did their perimeter check at the far side of the property. Her bedroom window overlooked the garden trellis, a risky climb, but manageable. She packed a small backpack with essentials: the USB drive, Julian's old phone, some cash she'd saved from birthday gifts, and a change of clothes. Before leaving, she placed a handwritten note on her pillow. "Mom, I'm sorry I have to help Helena." Part of her hoped the note might spark some remnant of maternal love or conscience in Cassandra deep down, though she knew it would only accelerate whatever sinister plans were in motion. Just after 2 a.m., Lily slipped out her window and carefully descended the trellis. The grounds were dark, with only security lights illuminating the perimeter. She had almost reached the back gate when headlights suddenly flooded the garden. Lily dove behind a cluster of hydrangea bushes, her heart pounding wildly. A black sedan had pulled up to the service entrance. A man stepped out, his silhouette sharp against the car's headlights. On his jacket was a logo she recognized from the video footage: Davenport Security. He spoke into a phone, his voice carrying in the quiet night. "The girl is making her move. By tomorrow morning, everything will be wrapped up just as Mrs. Prescott wants." Lily remained frozen until the man returned to his car. Then, abandoning her original route, she scaled the garden wall at its lowest point and dropped down into the adjacent property. For the next hour, she navigated the wealthy neighborhood in darkness, keeping to shadows her destination clear in her mind: the home of her former literature teacher, Mr. Harris. He had left teaching the previous year to return to his law practice, but had maintained a special connection with Lily, encouraging her writing and critical thinking. More importantly, he had once mentioned his previous work with anti-corruption cases and had subtly indicated his distrust of the Prescott family's business practices. It was nearly 4 a.m. when Lily, exhausted and frightened, knocked on his door. Mr. Harris, a light sleeper since his days working high-stress legal cases, answered cautiously, then quickly ushered the terrified girl inside. "Lily, what on earth?" "Please help," she gasped. "They framed Helena. They're going to kill her. And maybe me too." Rather than dismissing her as hysterical, Mr. Harris listened intently as she explained everything, his expression growing graver by the minute. When she showed him the video evidence on Julian's phone, he immediately reached for his own phone. "Detective Collins, it's Harris. I apologize for the hour, but I need your help with something urgent." "Yes, it involves the Prescott case." By dawn, a covert team of investigators had been assembled. Mr. Harris explained to Lily that his friend was part of an anti-corruption task force that had been monitoring Davenport's organization for months, but they'd lacked concrete evidence connecting him to the Prescotts. "What you've brought us," he told Lily, "might be the missing piece." Meanwhile, at Prescott Manor, Cassandra discovered Lily's empty bed and note. Her composed facade cracked momentarily before she made a frantic call. "Davenport, the girl is gone." She left a note about helping Helena. Her voice turned cold. "Deal with her before she reaches the courthouse." Davenport's response was calm, professional. "The contingency plan is already in place. We'll make it look like an unfortunate accident on the way to court." Back in my cell, I was awakened for pre-trial preparation, but something felt different. A sense of impending change hung in the air. Whether for better or worse, I couldn't tell. As I was escorted to meet with Briggs one final time, Ruby passed by me in the corridor and pressed a folded scrap of paper into my hand. Someone sent word, don't lose hope. I clutched the note, afraid to believe in its promise, yet unable to extinguish the tiny flame of possibility it ignited. Across town, Lily was being driven to the courthouse by an undercover officer. Mr. Harris sat beside her, reviewing what would happen when they presented their evidence. Neither noticed the black SUV that had begun following them several blocks back. As they turned onto the highway, the SUV accelerated, pulling alongside them. Through the window, Lily saw a face that matched the man from the video, Davenport himself, raising what appeared to be a silenced pistol. Time seemed to freeze as I watched Davenport approach Lily's car, his hand reaching inside his jacket. From my position in the courtroom awaiting sentencing, I had no idea of the deadly confrontation unfolding across town. Two separate moments of truth, playing out simultaneously, one that would seal my fate behind bars, and another that might save me if Lily survived. Davenport stepped out of his black SUV with practiced confidence, his movements unhurried as he approached the car containing Lily. Inside, she pressed herself against the seat. Terror paralyzed her small body. She knew with absolute certainty that if she stepped out of that vehicle, she wouldn't live to testify. The undercover officer driving the car, a seasoned detective assigned by Mr. Harris, subtly signaled for Lily to remain silent and still. His hand moved slowly toward his concealed weapon. "Just smile," he whispered. "Act scared, which shouldn't be hard, but don't panic." Davenport's lips curled into a cold smile as he tapped on the window. "Car trouble, I'd be happy to help a young lady and her father." What Davenport didn't realize was that this confrontation had been anticipated. From concealed positions on both sides of the road, undercover officers emerged from unmarked vehicles, weapons trained on him. "Davenport, drop your weapon. You've been under surveillance since last night." The lead officer's command shattered the morning quiet. For just a split second, surprise registered on Davenport's composed face before it transformed into a mocking smile. His hand moved with lightning speed toward his concealed gun, but before he could draw it, two officers tackled him to the ground. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he snarled as they cuffed him. "Actually, we know exactly who we're dealing with," the lead detective replied. "The Anti-Corruption Task Force has been building a case against you for months. We just needed the final connection to the Prescotts." When they searched Davenport's SUV, the evidence was damning. Hidden in a specially constructed compartment in the trunk were documents detailing illegal financial transactions, lists of offshore bank accounts, and most crucially, audio recordings of conversations with Cassandra. One recording played as officers cataloged the evidence. "Once the cleanup is complete, I don't want to see that girl again. Is that clear, Davenport?" Cassandra's unmistakable voice sent chills through everyone present. Lily was quickly escorted to police headquarters where Mr. Harris and the investigative team reviewed all the evidence she had collected. Despite her exhaustion and the trauma of nearly being killed, she had one urgent plea: "Please save Helena before it's too late. Her sentencing is this morning." The police chief immediately issued an emergency arrest warrant for Cassandra Prescott and directed officers to the courthouse to halt my sentencing proceedings. Meanwhile, I stood before the judge trying to maintain my dignity as he summarized the charges against me. Each word felt like a physical blow. 20 years of loyal service reduced to breach of trust and grand theft. The courtroom seemed to close in around me as I faced the moment of sentencing. Walter Briggs sat with his head bowed, his case notes closed. He had done what he could, but we both knew it wasn't enough. The prosecution had been ruthless, painting me as a calculated thief who had exploited the Prescott's trust for years. As the judge prepared to announce my sentence, I looked up at the ornate ceiling of the courtroom. If this is the end, I thought, at least I lived true to my conscience. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside the courtroom doors. Voices raised in urgent discussion followed by the sound of running feet. The judge paused, annoyed by the interruption. The doors burst open. The police chief strode in, followed by Lily and Mr. Harris. They carried thick folders and a USB drive. "Your Honor," the chief announced, "I request an immediate stay of proceedings. We have evidence proving Ms. Barrett's innocence and implicating others in a criminal conspiracy." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and gasps. The judge, visibly startled, called for order and directed the bailiffs to clear the courtroom of all but essential personnel. "This is highly irregular," he said, "but given the nature of the claim, I'll review this evidence immediately." The next 30 minutes were surreal. The video Lily had captured was projected onto the courtroom's evidence screen. There was Cassandra speaking openly about framing me. There was Davenport discussing their criminal enterprise. Most damning was Cassandra's casual remark. Helena was the perfect pawn, who would suspect a loyal housekeeper of 20 years. The judge's expression grew progressively darker as the evidence mounted. When the videos concluded, he immediately ordered my handcuffs removed. While the court reviewed the evidence, police officers had moved quickly to arrest Cassandra. She was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled, her designer outfit rumpled from the arrest. Gone was the poised socialite. In her place stood a cornered criminal. When she saw Lily standing beside me, her eyes widened with rage. "You betrayed your own mother for a servant," she hissed, struggling against the officer's hold. Lily stood straight, her young face showing a maturity far beyond her years. "I chose what was right," she replied simply. The final shock came when Julian was escorted in as a witness. He had been arrested at an illegal gambling establishment where he'd been trying to pay off debts. Under pressure from prosecutors offering a reduced sentence, he confessed to his role in framing me and laundering money for his mother and Davenport. When our eyes met across the courtroom, Julian gave a small shrug as if to say, "Nothing personal." As if destroying my life had been merely an inconvenient business decision. After reviewing all evidence, the judge cleared his throat and addressed the courtroom. "In light of this extraordinary evidence, all charges against Helena Barrett are hereby dismissed. Proceedings against Cassandra Prescott, Julian Prescott, and Richard Davenport for conspiracy fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice will commence immediately." I turned to Lily, grasping her small hand in mine. Tears of relief streamed down both our faces. Yet amidst the overwhelming gratitude, a question lingered in my mind. Is this truly justice complete, or just the beginning of another battle? For even with Cassandra and her accomplices facing prosecution, I had lost everything: my home, my reputation, months of my life. And the whispers from Ruby about Davenport's extensive network suggested that more powerful figures might remain hidden in the shadows. Stepping outside the courthouse, I was nearly overwhelmed by sensations I had taken for granted my entire life. The warmth of sunlight on my skin, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of nearby flowering trees, the sounds of the city, all of it hit me with an intensity that brought tears to my eyes. Freedom. After months in a cage, the simple act of walking without restraints felt surreal. "Helena." Lily broke away from Mr. Harris and ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist, just as she had done countless mornings in the Prescott kitchen. "We did it. We won." I held her tight, unable to speak, past the lump in my throat. This child had risked everything: her safety, her family, her future, to save me. The courage in her small frame humbled me completely. Mr. Harris stood a few steps behind, watching our reunion with quiet satisfaction. His eyes met mine over Lily's head, and he gave a small, proud nod. Without his belief in Lily's story, none of this would have happened. We had barely taken a few steps toward the waiting car when reporters swarmed us. Cameras flashed microphones, thrust forward, voices calling out questions all at once. The headlines would dominate the news cycle for weeks. Cassandra Prescott, socialite revealed as mastermind of criminal enterprise. Helena Barrett, loyal housekeeper, survives deadly frame-up. A reporter pushed closer. Miss Barrett, how does it feel to be vindicated? I paused, considering my words carefully. The truth may be buried. I said simply, but it never dies. The trials that followed were swift by legal standards. The evidence against Cassandra Julian and Davenport was overwhelming, bolstered by Julian's testimony after he accepted a plea deal. Cassandra received 25 years for fraud money, laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of her crimes, revealed as nothing more than an elaborate mask hiding ruthless ambition. Davenport's sentence was even harsher, 30 years without possibility of parole. His criminal organization had tentacles reaching into illegal gambling, blackmail, and worse. Julian, despite his cooperation, was sentenced to 10 years. His last look at me across the courtroom held what might have been regret, but it came far too late. I visited the women's prison once, not to see Cassandra, but to thank Ruby. She had been released on parole, her information about Davenport's organization earning her a reduced sentence. As she walked away, she called back over her shoulder, "Some people think money makes them untouchable, always satisfying when they're proven wrong." 1 month after my exoneration, Edward Prescott requested to meet me at a quiet cafe downtown. He looked like he had aged a decade. The proud, confident man I had served for 20 years now sat hunched, his eyes hollow with guilt. "Helena," he began haltingly, "I was blind. I failed to see what was happening in my own home." He pushed an envelope across the table. "This can never make up for what happened, but it might help you start over. And if you'd consider returning to the house for Lily's sake." I gently slid the envelope back. "I'll accept the settlement your lawyers have offered as compensation for my wrongful imprisonment, Mr. Prescott. But some houses can never be homes again." I softened my voice, seeing his pain. "Lily needs stability now. You both do, but not with me in that house. Too many shadows live there." The settlement from the Prescotts, along with damages from the city for my wrongful imprisonment, provided enough funds to begin a new chapter with Mr. Harris's legal guidance. I purchased a spacious Victorian home on the outskirts of town, after extensive renovations that transformed the space into a warm, welcoming haven. The Garden of Light opened its doors, a support center for orphaned and abandoned children. Edward granted me partial custody of Lily, an arrangement that gave her stability while allowing them to rebuild their relationship. She moved into the room I had prepared especially for her, with bookshelves filled with fairy tales and a window seat overlooking the gardens. Mr. Harris became our legal advisor, his quiet dedication to justice evolving into something more personal as he volunteered to teach weekly literature classes to our children. 6 months after opening day, Lily and I sat on a wooden bench in the center of the blooming garden, reading to a circle of enraptured children. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on their upturned faces. When the story ended and the children scattered to play, Lily remained beside me. "Helena," she asked suddenly, "do you ever regret not defending yourself more when everything happened? Even when you realized it was a setup, you stayed quiet to protect me." I considered her question carefully. "No," I answered truthfully, "because that silence showed me just how brave you truly are. Some battles can't be fought alone." She leaned against my shoulder, content with my answer, and we watched the children play in comfortable silence. A week later, an unmarked envelope arrived at the center. Inside was a single typewritten line: "Justice has been served, but are you certain no one stands behind Davenport?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then gazed out the window where children laughed and played under the watchful eyes of our staff. Was it a threat, a warning, or simply an attempt to disrupt the peace we had found. That evening, as Lily helped me tend to the flower beds, I squeezed her hand gently. If darkness returns, I told her, we know how to create light. She nodded, understanding more than any child her age should need to, yet instead of fear, I saw determination in her eyes, the same courage that had saved us both. From the hilltop where our center stood, you could see the entire garden spreading out below, vibrant with colors filled with children's laughter, the sign reading "The Garden of Light," swaying gently in the evening breeze. Not every story ends with happily ever after. Sometimes living truthfully is the most beautiful ending of all.